Okay, so we are holding in Perek Mem Hey, Pasuk Yud Zayin. And now Pare speaks up and tells Yosef what to tell his brothers. Vayomer Pare el Yosef zois asu, emor alachecha zois asu, ta'anu es be'irechem uluchuvoyu arzu Canaan. So Yosef is told by Pare what to tell his brothers. Here's what you should tell them to do. Tell them to do the following: load up their animals and go off quickly, immediately to the land of Canaan. So Pare's instructions to Yosef themselves are broken up into two parts. This is the first part, these first two psukim, Yudayin and Yudches. The second part is the next two psukim, Yutes and Chav, where there's a break in between and indicating that this is a new section. It begins Va'ato tzuvesa zois asu, and this time this introduces the Agolos. So this is a command to Yosef, Va'ato tzuvesa. There's a stress placed on the fact that it's a command to Yosef, and this introduces Agolos. Kichu lochem me'eretz Mitzrayim Agolos. So it's told that he should take Agolos. He's told that the Agolos should come from Eretz Mitzrayim. And you notice, of course, that the second half of each of there's a great parallel of the two instructions, because the first half of Paro's instructions to Yosef evolve: load up your animals and go to Canaan, A, and bring your father and family, B, and C, I'm going to give you Tov Eretz Mitzrayim. And the third part also involves something about those three parts, but here it's not load up your animals, it's take wagons and then bring your Taf, Noshim, and father, which we had said already in the first half of the instructions. Take Avichem and Batechem. And here, there's this thing about not being worried about the Kalim, but again, Tov Kol Eretz Mitzrayim Lachem Hu, like V'eton Lachem B'Tov Eretz Mitzrayim. So we have to read these two things in parallel, and we have to understand what's the second one amplifying the first, how is it changing the first. But I'm not going to focus on all that for this shir, but we are going to talk about the Agolos. But before we even get into the specifics of Pare's instructions to Yosef, we have to really step back and say, wait a second, Pare is really repeating, not only is he repeating himself and giving two sets of instructions here, but he is actually telling them something that Yosef himself had already told them, because Yosef already told him, go home and hurry and bring Yaakov and all the children, etc. And here, Pare is giving the same instructions. So why do we need Pare to repeat the instructions that Yosef himself had given? So the obvious way to look at this is to say, well, that's getting to the heart of the question here, which is whose instructions are we following, or who is instructing what to do? Is it Yosef instructing what to do, or is it Pare instructing what to do? And this is most noticeable when it comes to the Agolos. Because when it comes to the Agolos, Pare doesn't merely tell Yosef what to do, but he says, Va'ato tzuvesa, I am commanding you. And in line with that Pare is asserting that this is him commanding to take the Agolos. In Pasuk Chav Aleph, it says he gave them Agolos al pi Faroi. Okay, so there's a question of who is calling the shots here. And furthermore, we find something interesting about the question of who's calling the shots. There's four things. First of all, Va'ato tzuvesa. Second of all, that's al pi Faroi. And now 3 and 4 is that the Pasuk Chav Zayin says that Yaakov saw the Agolos asher sholach Yosef losei soisoi, the Agolos that Yosef had sent. And then in Perek Mem Vav, Pasuk Hey, it says they carried Yaakov in the Agolos that asher sholach Pare losei soisoi. So the exact same words. Is it Agolos asher sholach Yosef losei soisoi, or is it Agolos asher sholach Pare losei soisoi? So before, we have to understand that. But at this point, I just want you to notice that there's a whole question of who is directing things and who's telling everyone what to do. So then there's no surprise then that, or I shouldn't say there's no surprise, but we should read the fact that Pare is repeating Yosef's instructions in line with the fact that there seems to be a question of who is calling the shots. And therefore, in line with that, we have Yosef doing something and then Pare doing the same thing. Okay, so what's the significance of the Agolos? And then we'll get to the question of what's the significance? So in other words, now let's focus on the Agalos. One question is, what's the significance of sending wagons at all? Why is this have to be done al pi Fari? And why do we have this change of Yosef sent them and then it says Pare sent them? Okay. So, as we noticed before, in Pasuk Yud Ches it says Kru es avichem, and then Pasuk Yud Tes repeats it, Nusasem es avichem uvasem. So what's this adding to what he told them in the first two psukim? It's adding that this time you should go do it ba'agolis. He wants them to bring him in wagons. Now notice something very interesting in this Pasuk Yud Tes. Let's focus on Pasuk Yud Tes. Kuchulach hameretz b'tzayim agolis. So we noted, number one, that it's a command. We'll get to the Zois Asu soon. Number two, that it's from Eretz Mitzrayim. And look what happens with these agolas. They're there l'tapchem u'leneshechem v'leneshechem. The purpose of the agolas, or the function of the agolas, is for the children and for the wives. Unsasem es avichem uvasem. So how do we read this pasuk? Who's it for? Is it for the taf and the nashim, or is it to carry the father? And look again in Perek Mem Vav Pasuk A, a similar thing where it says Vayisu b'nei Yisrael es Yaakov zavim es tapam es neshehem ba'agoles asher sholach Pare laseis oisoi. So here it says clearly that the purpose of the agolis was to carry Yaakov, and that's in line with what it says here in this pasuk Yud Tes Unusasem es avichem uvasem, and yet it's also for the nashim b'taf. So which one is it? So I think the pshat is, let's hold off on saying the pshat, but I just want to point out that there's a tension here. Is it for the nashim b'taf, or is it to carry Yaakov? Okay. Now, and remember, we have to try to remember to get back to the Zois Asu, this expression, Zois Asu. Okay, so let's start with the first question. What's the significance of agolos b'chal? What are the function of the agolos? So agolos are interesting. Why? Because agolos can get you someplace quickly, and they also, which is related, they also do away with the need for legs, whether human or animal. In other words, like this: you stand on your own 2 feet, you walk. Okay, sometimes you supplement that, or you replace your own feet with the feet of the animal that you're sitting on top of. And an agola is even more removed, because an agola has wheels, and an agola allows you to be further removed from raglayim and to be nisa, to be sitting in a way that's removed from the or higher than that messy getting in touch with the ground with your feet or with the animal's feet. Okay. And agolas also allows you to go quickly, I think. And we'll show you soon where these two things come up. And then the fact that he's giving him agolas to go speedily is in line with what Yosef said, that we have to do this maharu. Okay, now where do I get this, that agolas are something that you can travel with speed and they have wheels? Obviously it's Pashtazai, but I want to show you the pasuk in the end of Perek Chof Ches in Yeshaya, which, if you remember, is a place that we've been looking at a lot regarding our prakim here. There it talks about an oifen agolah. This is Perek Chof Ches pasuk of Zayin, has the wheel of the agolah. And in Perek Chof Ches pasuk Chof Ches, it talks about the agolah and the farashov, the charioteers, or something like that, or horsemen. So an agolah has wheels and parashim, and of course, once we're thinking about wheels and parashim, we think about Mitzrayim's army and Mitzrayim's might that is typified by their horses and their parashim, especially when they gave chase at the departure from Mitzrayim to Kriyas Yamsuf. And there's a stress on the wheels of Ayosas Oifan Markevoisov Ayanahagu Bechvedus, a pasuk that I maintain is going to be alluded to, as we shall see later, there further in Yeshaya. But the point, Linanenu, is that agolas are me'eretz Mitzrayim. There's something unique about agolas and the association with Mitzrayim, because they are used for traveling with speed, which horses do, and they have an association with parashim. Okay. So now going back to the ambiguity over here, which is Is it for the babies and the women, or is it for the father? So it seems to be to carry the father, but also seems to be for the babies and the Nashim Ataf. So I think the pshat is like this. The pshat is that Taf and Nashim require Agolus because they can't necessarily sit on an animal. For the Avichem, the purpose of the father, the purpose of the function of Agolus for their father was Loseisai. Not just to get him to Mitzrayim, Dafka to get him to Mitzrayim in style, where he's being born aloft. The Taf and Nashim require the Agolus because they have no other way to get to Mitzrayim. They can't necessarily go on the animals. So Agolus are make them able to travel, enable them to travel. But for Yaakov, the purpose of Agolus was Laseisai, to travel in style in a very specific way, that he is Nisa. Okay. So therefore, he's telling like this: take Agolus with Nashim Ataf, and therefore, and the reason why this is interesting to me is because that way you'll be able to carry Yaakov, and I want you to carry Yaakov. That's my objective. I want Yaakov to be able to be carried to Mitzrayim. Okay, now let's get a little deeper into this, and we'll get to the question of the significance of that Agolus, and why there's this whole debate whether it's why there's a stress that it's al pi Faroi. Why is this whole debate whether it's coming from Pari or it's coming from Yosef? So we know that what happened here, Yaakov sees the Agolus that Yosef sent Lasisai. Okay, he's very excited. Vatachiruach Yaakov Aviyam. And then Perek Vav, he goes to Beersheba, and in Beersheba he has a vision, and the vision is Anochi Akela L'Ki Avicha, and don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Anochi Ered Imcha Mitzrayim v'Anochi A'alcha Gam Oloi. And he gets up from Beersheba, Vayisu B'nei Yisrael as Yaakov Aviyam, and they carry him in Agolus. So this reminds us of another time where Yaakov was going into exile and stops in, there it's, okay, he doesn't stop in Beersheba, Vayetze Yaakov Beersheba, and, okay, there's a whole association with the dream and Beersheba, we're not going to go into that. But he has a dream, and in the dream, Hashem says, Ani Hashem Elokei Avram Avicha. Here we have Anochi Akil Elokei Avicha. And there Hashem tells him, don't worry, I'm going to guard you. And there we have Olim V'Yardim. Hine Malach Elokim Olim V'Yardim. And here, Hashem said, Anochi Ered Imcha Mitzrayim V'Anochi A'alcha Gam Oloi. So just like there on his descent to Mitzrayim, he had a dream about the Malachim or Olim V'Yardim. Here, I'm sorry, in the descent in his departure to Haran, he had a dream about Olim V'Yardim. Here too, on his descent to Mitzrayim, he had a dream about Hashem being Olim V'Yored. Okay, there's Malachim, here it's Hashem. Is there a difference? A lot to think about. But why is this interesting for us? Because one other parallel before we talk about why it's interesting to us. There it says he leaves Beersheba, he has a dream, and he comes after the dream by Yisa Yaakov Raglov by Yelech Artz B'nei Kedem, and he sees a be'er. And there it says, in that story, it says Be'er 7 times, which is replacing Beersheba. And here, after his vision, they carry him, and there's a list of his Shivim descendants. There he sees his wife, of course, and he sees 7 Be'er, so that's Beersheba, and here he has the Shivim of his descendants. Okay, but L'Nyonenu, after the dream, in his departure to Haran, the pasuk says, Vayiso Yaakov Raglov Vayelech Artz B'nei Kedem. He picked up his feet. And here it says, after his dream, Vayokom Yaakov mi Be'eshava Vayisu B'nei Yisrael es Yaakov Aviyim. V'stapan v'sanashem. So in Agolus. So in both dreams that are about Hashem watching him when he's going to exile, and like I said, they have this or both visions, and they're very closely parallel each other because they have Aliyah and Yerida, and they're about going to exile and not being afraid. In both of them, after the vision, Yaakov, the pasuk notes Yaakov is able to now travel in a certain way. And there it says, Vayiso Yaakov Raglov. He picked up his feet. What does that mean? So Chazal say, Nasa Kal Lolechas. All of a sudden, he felt himself being borne aloft, which it's like his feet were just, light, which parallels the psukim of Malachi Vitzav Elach L'Shmocha, Kapayim Yisa Unecha, and other psukim about Hashem bearing the tzaddik. We'll soon look at some of them, I think. So, but the point is that after he has a vision that Hashem is with him, Vayisa Yaakov Raglov, and similarly over here, after he has a vision that Hashem is with him, now he's traveling, he's borne aloft in Agalois. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael es Yaakov. Vayokom. Let's read the pasuk again. After he has the vision that Hashem is with him, Vayokom Yaakov, he has a chemo. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael es Yaakov avim. He's being borne aloft. Now it's like he's literally being carried. But the point is, symbolically, he now feels that he can go in style. Now, let's look at a pasuk in Yeshaya Perek Mem, which we looked at in the beginning of Vayetze. In the beginning of Vayetze, so Yaakov leaves Beersheba, and he thinks he's away from Hashem, and all of a sudden he has a vision that Hine Hashem Nitzav Olav, and Hashem tells him, I'm going to watch you. And corresponding to this narrative, we have at the end of Yeshaya Perek Mem, starting, let's say, from Pasuk Chavav, Su'u marim einechem u'ru mibar eila. Pick up your eyes to the heavens. Okay, so Yaakov sees Hine Hashem Nitzav Olav. Lama soimer Yaakov daber Yisrael. This is the Dakim Hashem Melech Kavish B'Tayaber. Why does Yaakov say that Hashem doesn't see me? Don't you know that Hashem rules the whole world? So therefore, even though you're leaving Eretz Yisrael, Hashem is aware of you. Lo yiyaf lo yiga. Hashem doesn't weary, and soon we'll see the point is you also, Yaakov, are not going to weary, because noisan lo yif koyach. So Ya'alu Ever Kaneshorim. Yaakov can have a wing like an eagle. Yarutzu v'lo yigau, yelchu v'lo yi'afu. So by knowing that Hashem was with him, Yaakov became able to travel without being weary. And of course, Yaakov at some point on his way back ends up having problems with his legs. So there's something about Yaakov's legs. Okay, but there it says again, let's go weiter in Yeshaya Perek Mem Aleph. Those that are machalif koyach, oirach v'raglov lo yavai. He doesn't have to hit the ground with his feet. So Vayisa Yaakov Raglov says if his feet are not touching the ground, and here specifically he's being borne aloft in Agalois, there's no feet on the ground, no boots on the ground. That means he's a certain remove from him and the toirach of traveling. And that follows from the fact that, what? Hashem is with him. So he has that strength and security of being in an agala. Okay, now you remember, now this is a little bit of a long range kind of Gzer Shava. Notice that it says over there in the end of Perek Mem, Ya'alu Ever Kanesharm, like eagles. Okay, so I want to look at other places where it talks about Hashem bearing aloft his children as eagles do. This brings us to Parshas Ha'azinu, Kinesher Yo'ir Kinoi Al Goizalov Yerachef. But before that it says, Ki Chelek Hashem Amoy Yaakov Chevad Nachalose. So it's the idea that Yaakov is the Nachal of Hashem, and therefore Hashem bears him aloft Kinesher and Yisa Ehu. He bears him aloft, like Vayisa Yaakov Raglov, or Vayisu B'nei Yisrael Yaakov Avim. And then there it says, Hashem Badad Yanchenu Ve'ein Imo El Nechar. Hashem is alone with him. There's no other God. So that's like, Onochi Eredim Chometzai, Onochi Eredim Al Chagamal. You think you're going down to the place of other gods. It's a dangerous, spiritually dangerous place, Mitzrayim. So Hashem says, no, Hashem Badad Yanchenu. And therefore, next pasuk there in Hazinu, Vayinikeu Devash Misel of Hashem and Mechal Mishtzur, Chem Ezboka B'chaliv Tzoyin, Mchelev Kali Skito. You remember the whole question about Mitzur Devash Aspi Eka, or Avayachalem Mechelev Chita, right? And Chelev Chita Miasbiach until Mekuvam Zayin. And here, Pari is guaranteeing the Chelev, the Tuv Kol Eretz and Chelev Haaretz. So really, and he's sending Agolas, right? So I'm saying, look, Agolas are speed, Agolas are like Nesher, Agolas are that Hashem is bearing you aloft. If Hashem is bearing you aloft, then we'll get to the question of who is sending this. Is it Mitzrayim? Is it Pari? Is it Hashem? We'll get to that soon. But I'm just drawing the parallel over here, that when Hashem bears aloft his people, and then remember in Hazinu is a mention of Yaakov, then he gives him the Chelev Haaretz. So to the Agola is that Pari is sending to Yaakov, which parallel the Vayisu Yaakov Raglav we have in Vayetze. And about that story it says, Hashem is telling Yaakov, don't worry, Hashem sees you, and he's carrying you like a Nesher in Vayishaya Perek Mem. That brings us to Hazinu, the Nesher. And there Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. Once he has Chelev Chita, then there's a danger of Vayishman. But I want to draw attention to Yeshurun, which is the other name, of course, for Yaakov. Okay. Right? Good. And this brings us then to another place. This Hashem Bodod Yanchenu brings us to the Nevuah of Bilam, who said, what did Bilam say? Bilam said, Hin levadod yishkoin, uvagoy blas chashav. So the badod yanchenu is like levadod yishkoin. And there it says, but I can't find the pasuk now. Okay, let's find the pasuk. Here it is. Uvagoyim lo yischashav. So this is like Anochi Eredim Chametzav Anochi Al Chagam Aloi. Don't worry, you will not be counted among the nations. You will still have your distinctness. And by the way, the Shivim Nefesh of Mitzrayim that follows this story, this vision of Anochi Eredim Chametzav Anochi Chagam Aloi is telling Yaakov that you are not counted among the Shivim of Bahanchil Elyon going Bafride Bnei Adam again in Nazinu. Yatziv Gvulos Amim leMispar Bnei Yisrael. So there's the Mispar Bnei Yisrael correspond to the Gvulos Amim because that's the pasuk prior to Yaakov Chelik Hashem Am Yaakov Nachalose, because we are not Bagoyim Lo Yischashav. So that's okay. Let me just make it clear what I just said. In Ha'azinu it says Yatziv Gvulos Amim leMispar Bnei Yisrael Ki Chelik Hashem Amoy Yaakov Nachalose, etc. And the Nesher and Badot. And in Parshas Balak it says, Hein levadod yishkoin v'agoyim lo yischashav mimon afar Yaakov and Yisrael, and then Yesharim, which is I think a reference to Yeshurun, the third name of Yaakov. Okay, so the fact that Yaakov is badod means that he's not counted among the nations, and that's the lesson over here that Hashem tells Yaakov, Anochi Eredim Chametzav Anochi Al Chagam Aloi. Don't worry, you're not going to mischashav among the goyim. And there in Ha'azinu it says that's associated with the fact that Yatziv Gevulos Amim leMispar Bnei Yisrael, the fact that the numbers of the nations are correspond to the number of Bnei Yisrael, and therefore we have Parshas Vayigash, after Hashem tells Yaakov, Anochi Eredim Chametzav Anochi Chagam Aloi, we have a list of Shivim Nefesh to tell you are not one of the 70 nations. On the contrary, you correspond to the Shivim Amim. Okay? And why is this important for our purposes? Because I wanted to bring out the Nesher. I'm just bringing out the proof that carrying a Golas is like being born aloft on a Nesher, and then Hashem gives us Chelev Chita, like Pari said, come on Agolas and I'll give you Chelev Haaretz. Okay. So Agolos have, by the way, Agolos are Agoil, they have Ifanim, they have wheels. Okay, now let's go back to, so now we spoke about the significance of Agolos is that Yaakov is being born aloft, and for Yaakov to be born aloft is a very important thing because Yaakov being born aloft is symbolic. It means that he is maybe going someplace with speed, going someplace with security, going someplace where he knows he's supposed to be going, and it's not just that he's schlepping along somewhere that he's forced to go, but it's like this is where he wants to go. This is where he's being aided in his travels. Aided by whom? By Hashem, like we have in Vayetze, or maybe here it's aided by Paro. So that's the tension that we're going to get to soon. But let's talk about now the second part of the pasuk where it says Zois Asu. Now the Zois Asu, as we noted previously, Yosef said to the brothers, Zois Asu v'chyu. Yaakov said to the brothers, Imken Eifo Zois Asu. And Pari said to Yosef, tell your brother Zois Asu, and then he tells him, Vatotzu v'esa Zois Asu. So Zois Asu, here's what you should do. What's it so significant? Everyone's saying, here's what you should do, because the question is, who are we listening to? Like I said, who is calling the shots? Why is that so significant, who's calling the shots? Because the whole question of this whole story is, are we listening to the mouth of Hashem? Are we looking for Nevuah? Or are we going to accept and take orders from the order of Mitzrayim and the mouth of Pare? As it says in Yeshaya Parak Lamed Pasuk Beis, the big sin was Holchem Laredis Mitzrayim Ufi Lo Sha'alu. They go down to time and don't ask from the mouth of Hashem. So the strength of Pare, which is of course typified, characterized by his horses and Parashim, and associated with that is the Agolos. So going down and not asking Pi Hashem, or rather going up Pi Pare, is a very dangerous thing. And in a deeper level, just something we've been discussing since the beginning of Parshas Vayeshev in different ways, but very much so the beginning of Miketz. There's the Pi Hashem, which is what you do according to Das Hashem. There's the Pi Para, which is what you do according to the order of Avodah Zarah. And then there's the Pi of Yosef. Yosef is very interesting because Yosef, L'Shem Shemayim, dabbles in the dark arts of living under the order of Mitzrayim and vouching the Shloim Parei. And then there's another thing we spoke about, which is that once Hashem decrees that you should go into exile, then the Navi will tell you Hashem wants you to listen to them, like Yirmiyah did. So there's really four things you could do. You could live under the order of Hashem, Das Hashem. You could live under the order of Elohim Acherim, if you believe in that, like Parei does. You could believe that for the sake of Das Hashem, we have to forget Das Hashem, which was Yosef's very dangerous art. Or you could know sometimes that Hashem has deep plans which you can't understand, but He wants you and commands you to go forget about Hashem and listen to Parei, which is what Yirmiyah does. Anochi yadati machshavos. I forgot. That's something called Machshavos Hashem. The Navi says Hashem is now going into hiding, as it were, and He wants you to just know that He's thinking about you, but you can't fathom how, and you have to Dirshu Shloim Ha'ir, right? As we discussed. Okay. So we have this whole debate, who's calling the shots? Originally, it's Parei. So that's the significance of Ato Tzuvesa, because Parei is coming to assert that Parei is here calling the shots, which means, what does it mean, Parei calling the shots? I'm explaining to you exactly what that means. It means that there's an order, an ideal of Avodah Zarah that Parei is the master of and the head of. And this taking wagons are speed, wagons are might, are royal, they're associated with the Susim of the Parashim, follows from the ideal called Parei's divinity. Divinity of Parei, meaning whether Parei is divine or the divinity that he worships, it follows from that. And therefore, Va'atotzuve, this is Parei saying, look, I know what I'm doing here, and I'm telling you to take Agalas. And Yosef says, okay, I'll Pi Parei. So Yosef already told them, and now Parei is asserting his control. Okay. That's the answer of why it's repeated, because Parei is asserting control over Yosef, taking it back to himself. Now, is it so simple to accept Agolas from Parei? Let's see what it says in Yeshaya about Shai Perek Chavtes, of course, Perek Lamed, where it talks about not listening to Parei. Take the strength of Parei. The strength of Parei could turn into Baishes, Perek Gimel, Perek Lam Pasuk Gimel, which is you think Parei has strength as you know for your Agolas, not such a good thing. What does Yeshaya have to say about people who appreciate the speed and the power of horses and chariots? That's weiter in that Perek Lamed Pasuk Tezvav. Ki choy amar Adonai Elohim kadosh Yisrael b'shuva v'nachas tiv Hashem v'hashkidu v'vitchati agvaskim v'loy avisem. Hashem said everything could happen calmly, but no, you didn't want that. V'atoim loy chi al sus nonus al ken tunusun. You said you want to run. Okay, so you'll run. Val kal nirkav. We want to have a speedy flight. Al ken di kalu roid fechem. So it wasn't enough for you to go things gradually. You wanted everything to happen with power and with speed. And the punishment is going to be that power and speed are going to be used against you. Etc. Because you wanted things to happen quickly, so now power and speed are associated. Because you wanted it to happen quickly, the punishment is going to be that things are going to take longer. Your chanin is going to take longer. And ashrei kochoy lo, you have to now hope. You have to wait. You're not supposed to look for speed. You're supposed to look for doing things the right way, and the right way means gradually and developing. So you have to wait. And then the next pasuk, and of course, the previous shur, we've been going back and forth to these pasukim. I'm not going to bring in all the allusions and everything because it's richer if you go back to it and think about it, but that's pretty obvious. Perek Lamed pasuk Yud Tes, Am b'tzion yeshev b'Yushalayim, don't cry, Hashem will be choinin you, eat lechem tzar mayim lachatz, and then pasuk Chaf Aleph, Oznecha teshmana davar me'acharecha leim, ozeh davar l'chu boy. You're going to hear a voice from behind you saying, here's how you have to go. And this is when Yaakov is thinking, should I go to Mitzrayim, should I not go to Mitzrayim? Pi lo sha'alu, you can't do it without asking Hashem, right? He waits to have a vision from Hashem. Eventually a voice comes and says, go. But what's so fraught about going down to Mitzrayim? What's so fraught is that here you want the horse and the power, but actually you have to wait. You can't rush. You have to wait for Hashem. You have to hope for Hashem, and if you don't, things are going to take longer. Okay. So Yaakov is sort of reluctant not so pushed that he's going to accept the Agolus, right? We shall soon see. He was very excited about the Agolus. He was excited about the Agolus Asher Sholach Yosef losses, remember? And then after he had a vision, he went to the Agolus Asher Sholach Paro. We'll get to that in a moment, I think, right? We're going to get there very soon. But first I want you to look at Amos Perek Beis. Amos Perek Beis talks about the sin of selling a tzaddik for shoes. That's, of course, a reference to Mechiras Yosef. And there it says, Perek Beis Pasuk Yud Gimel, Hine anochi me'ek tachtechem ka'asher to'iko agalo ha'malei Allah amir. Let's say you have a wagon full of grain, and it's so full that it collapses. So Hashem's going to collapse it, not bear us anymore. V'avad monois mikal, and the light person won't be able to run away anymore. V'gibar lo yilmanit nafshay, v'kal b'ragel v'lo yimanit, v'roich avasos lo yimanit nafshay. So the Agala is associated with strength, with the parashim, with the susim, because susim could obviously harness the Agala. And the Agala is going to collapse. The Agala bearing grain. Like here, these Agalas are going back to Canaan. And they're here to carry food. The purpose of this whole trips to Canaan are all about grain, of course. And the Agalas typifies or symbolizes the might of Mitzrayim, but the Agala could sometimes collapse, and that symbolizes the fact that the mighty sometimes are unsuccessful. Okay, now let's get to the question of what's the point about Yosef sending Agalas and Paro sending Agalas, which is all about, as we said, the Agalas is the might of Mitzrayim. And Yaakov has to wait till there's a voice telling him where to go. Why? He doesn't want to hurry, because maybe you're supposed to wait for Hashem. So here's the pshat. On the other hand, he was excited about the Agalas, right? So we said, he was happy about the Agalas Asher Sholach Yosef Loses Oisai. And as we discussed, without repeating it, the Agalos that Yosef sent Loses Oisai led him to Vatechi Ruach Yaakov Avim. They led to a Masa, the Yisa Yaakov Einov, as it were. He picked up his eyes, he had a vision. Like we said, Su'umar Menechem U'umim Bara Ele. Okay, so that's a Masa, to pick up and to look to the heaven, to get a vision from heaven. So, Va'asa Ina Ve'ere B'chaloim. I think Yaakov said those words, by the way. Right? In Parshas Vayishlach. Not Vayishlach, Vayetze. Okay, so the fact that Yosef sent him Agalos, Loses Oisai, led him not to get up onto the Agalos and say Hashem is carrying me, but it did serve as an intermediary that he had a vision. So that induced a vision, whoever it did that. And once he had a vision, and the vision was Anochi Eridim Chamitzrayma, Anochi Alcha Gamoloi, then he was able to go in the Agalos Asher Sholach Paro Loses Oisai. What does that mean? That means like this. Can you accept Agalos that Paro sent? And this is a very important question. Given that they're coming from Paro's Paro, which is to say the order of Avodah Zarah, can you accept them, or is that all going to corrupt you? Now, Yosef holds we have to dabble in that. What if you don't hold like Yosef? Then you have to wait for Anochi Eridim Chamitzrayim of Anochi Alcha Gam Oloi to know that Hashem wants you to accept the Agalos from Paro. So it's exactly like the Navi says, Dirshu Shloim Ma'ir. Like Yirmiyah says, once there's a word from Hashem that I want you to do this, then you're accepting the Agalos from Paro as your means of serving Hashem. So while Yosef says we have to take the move away from Hashem and do something Mitzrayim Dik and Shloim Paro, and guarantee Shloim Paro, that's Yosef's Chiddush. Yaakov waits to take something from the Paro. He waits for the word of Hashem that says, Anochi Eridim Chamitzrayim, Anochi Alcha Gam Oloi. Okay, so there's Agalos Asher Sholach Yosef, meaning Yosef's agenda in sending the Agalos, and that is so that Vatachi Ruach Yaakov Avim, however that happens. I'm not going to go into that now. But to actually ride in them, which is to accept that it's something from Paro's sending, and remember Paro said it's Me'eretz Mitzrayim. So are you going to take Agalos Me'eretz Mitzrayim, which means to say they're associated with the whole Midah of Mitzrayim? And their answer is, well, it depends. If Hashem tells me to, I will. If not, not. Because if Hashem tells me to, then I'm accepting Paro because I know that that's what Hashem wants. That's mysterious. Okay, like the Navi says, Anochi Yadati is Machshavas Hashem Anochi Cheshav Aleya, Machshavas Hashem V'lo L'Ro, Teivu V'lo L'Ro, Achas Losem Achas Utikva. Okay. And as we said before, it says in Hazinu, Hashem gives us the Chelev, and here Paro is offering the Chelev. So there's a question over here. Whose Chelev is it? Here Paro is taking it's my Chelev. But really Hashem wants to give us the Chelev. But Hashem is utilizing Paro it's all utilizing Hashem's master plan. He's utilizing Pari and the Pari and that whole ideal and that whole order that Pari respects to advance his own plan. Okay? So this is Pari is the Mo'iz Pari, which turns into Baishas. The Mo'iz Pari is the Parashim, and we have to redeem that. Now, what do the Agolis end up doing to Pari, right? So here you have the Agolis of Pari, and he thinks he's sending them because he's mighty, and Hashem's like, no, take them. Just take them. How does the might of Pari end up serving Hashem's plan? So this also returned to Yeshaya, Soif, Perek, Lamid. There it says like this, Lamid Chav Zayin, Hine Shem Hashem Yimechok, Hine Shem Hashem Bo Mimechok, Boyer Apoy, V'choived Masa'o. So there's a Masa and it's heavy. And that's like the name of Hashem. Why? Because his lips are full of Zam. And his Ruach is like a Nachal Shoitev till the Tzavor. We spoke about this last week, Beichal Tzavorov. And it's a Resed Masa, it's a bit that's Masa, leads them astray. So you'd have a horse, and you put a bit on the horse, and it leads them astray. And what does this remind us of? That Hashem leads the horses of Mitzrayim into the Yam Suf. So the Agolos of Pari, the might of Pari that Yaakov is told to take, Hashem says, take them. They're there to lead Pari astray, to make him toyeh, because that might that Pari used, and now he's all proud of himself, because look how mighty I am, and I even saved Yaakov and his family with my might, is going to end up making him a Kshay Ruach, is going to contribute to being a Kshay Ruach. It's going to lead him into the sea. So it's like a res and maseh, and that's when the chvedus is that's when it's going to weigh him down. So the mehiros, in other words, chvedus is obviously the opposite of mehiros, because he has this speedy agolois. Therefore, he thinks he can chase after them and go into the yam. So and we get the chelev chito. And with that, we end. You know what? I'm not going to end. I think I just want to make a quick review because there's a lot of steps over here and it was pretty quick. Basically, the verse is like this, to summarize. There are these agalos, which are very significant. Why are they so significant? Because number one, Pari is giving instructions that Yosef did already. Number two, the Torah stresses that the agalos were given a Pari. Number 3 and 4 is that the agalos are sometimes called Yosef sending, sometimes called Pari sending. So the way we're tying it all together is like this, that the agalos indicate this very advanced way to travel and a mighty way to travel where you're not in touch with the ground, and that's something that's honorable for Yaakov, and we find the same thing that Yaakov gets the same thing when he's going out of Eretz Yisrael to exile. The first time he's born aloft, here too he's going to be born aloft. This is associated in this case with Pari and Eretz Mitzrayim because it's associated with the strength of Egypt, which is why it's so fraught to take this, which is why Pari is inserting himself and saying, I want to give you a command, here's what you have to do, which is why Yaakov only takes it after which is essentially a guarantee that, as we said, you're not going to be influenced by them. And on the contrary, the 70 Bnei Yisrael, corresponding to the 70 nations, and that way you're kept separate from them, and therefore you could take the Agolis, and they're not going to change you because you're only doing it based on the word of Hashem. Okay, this is the beautiful Torah here.